The title of this video is Racism Has Lost Its Meaning. Before I tell you why I think so, let me tell you why I feel like I'm qualified to talk about that. A lot of people will say, well, you're white, so you can't talk about it. Actually, there's only one thing about me that's white. But before I go into that, let me tell you a little bit about why I feel like I'm qualified to talk about it. One of the reasons is the way that I grew up. Growing up, my parents never said anything racist that I ever heard or behaved in a racist way. I was born in the 60s, and my parents were what you would call back then hippies, and they were on a personal journey. And as a child, me, my brothers and sisters, I ended up with 8 of us eventually, never saw either of my parents behave racist. When I was 7, my parents, my 3 brothers and sister, and I moved to an all-black and Puerto Rican neighborhood. There was one other white family, and until they moved out, we were the only whites in the neighborhood. The reason why I'm using air quotes is because that's really not the way I think. I don't think in terms of black and white and whatever. And as a matter of fact, I'm not even going to say that anymore during this video. That is just so that to give context. I guess I'll just say a person of color, but even that's not really the way I think, because when I look at a person, I read who they are. I can see it right away. Sometimes I can even see a picture of a person and I can read their soul. And the interesting thing is I've very, very rarely been wrong. So I don't know, you might call that prejudice, right? But that's just a gifting. I think we're all wired differently, and we all pay attention to different things. And I can read people, and so I don't look at their skin, but I look at what I'm reading from them as a person. Another reason why I'm uniquely qualified to talk about racism is because growing up, I got hooked on drugs at a young age. So I got hooked on drugs when I was 16, and I didn't get sober till I was 24. I had my 25th birthday in a rehab program. And as a result, I ended up raising a child on my own, a baby, a little girl who the doctor said was going to die, but I knew she wasn't going to die. And so my daughter is a woman of color, and my granddaughter is mixed. And so that's another reason why I'm uniquely qualified to talk about racism. Growing up, at the age of 7, we moved to a neighborhood where we were the only people not of color in the neighborhood, and I experienced a difference. I couldn't really figure out why people were always excluding me or treating me different at school, in grammar school. And then one thing that happened to me that made me realize that this was a real issue was, I think I was 10. Could have been younger, maybe 8, somewhere around 8 or 10. And I was walking home from my neighborhood, from school, going home, and I got surrounded by a bunch of kids. And I was excited because I'm a kid, and I'm like, I'm gonna get to play with these kids. And all of a sudden they started calling me names, and it was really confusing for me. They were calling me white, honky, cracker, and it just really, it's like it was a loss of innocence for me. It was like the floor dropped out from underneath me, and it really hurt bad. And I could tell that there was even there was some danger involved. Something about, I just could read that it was a potentially dangerous situation. So I left. I went home and I went to my mom and I'm like, Mom, what's a white honky cracker? And she said, honey, you are. And that really, I mean, she didn't put it quite that way, but that's how I remembered it. You know, I'm sure she probably comforted me and everything else, but that's what stuck out. Honey, you are. And so, you know, eventually I moved out. You know, I ran away from home. I had a tough childhood. It was really rough, and we were dirt poor. So that, growing up the way I grew up, dealing with all sorts of people, and I even ran into a situation where I probably could have switched, but I never did. It was when it was before I got sober, and I was in a park, and I'd been drinking. So I guess I was probably 18, I think. Yeah, I was 18 for sure. I was 18, I was drunk, I was upset, I had been having a rough day. A good friend of mine inadvertently had did something really rough on me, so I went and I just isolated, got alone. I was alone, I was drunk in a park, and I went up to the basketball court, and there was this guy that I ran into along the way, and he was like, let's go get some weed. And I was like, yeah, sounds good. This guy was making me happy because he was showing a lot of exuberance and being super friendly, and it was making me feel good because I was feeling down. So I went with him to the park, and everybody was like looking at me like suspiciously, but I was drunk, so I didn't really notice it. And then all of a sudden, somebody threw me the ball, so I went to go make a layup, and as soon as I went to go put the ball up in the air and shoot it, I got hit in the back of the head with a Colt 45 bottle, and everybody just started pounding on me. I feel like everybody on the basketball court took a piece out of me and beat on me. And me, I was kind of macho back then, and so I kept getting up, and they kept beating me down. Eventually, I could have died. This was one of the 10 times in my life when I could have died. But somebody saw it and called the cops. I woke up unconscious in the hospital with my head the size of, it was like swollen up twice as big, my, you know, just bleeding and swollen and knocked out and in bad shape. Like I said, I probably would have died because they were kicking me in my back. I had a fracture in my spine, stomping me, and but anyway, the next day when I went home, I was just standing out in the hallway, really depressed about the whole thing, having a cigarette, and this guy came up to me that was a good friend of me and my brother's. He was older, and he used to teach us kung fu. He used to teach us how to fight. And he was a very dark-skinned guy, a person of color, a man of color, young man. Probably, I was 18. I think he was probably 25 or something like that. And he said, look, he said, I heard what happened to you. That's messed up. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go get a gun. I'll get you one too, and we'll just go down there and we'll shoot those guys up. And I thought about it for a minute, and then I just was like, no, I'm not wired like that. And so I said, no, that's all right, Ronnie. I'm gonna pass on that. I'm not gonna do that. And I think that if I had did that, that maybe that switch, you know, I'd lost my innocence when I was 7 or 8, and I was aware that other people looked at things racially, but I never went to the point of becoming racist myself. And so I feel like that's the other reason why I'm uniquely equipped to talk about this issue. There's a bunch of other things too, like I work with young black young black adults, young adults, and teenagers, boys for quite a bit. And one thing I've noticed is people in even very, very tough situations, if they have positive interaction, that they will turn around